really lovely to have you here this morning talking to the parents of students at Selworthy School about preparing for adulthood, and in particular today this session was about the options for where their young person might live as adults. Thank you for agreeing to us being able to just film this so that we can try and put some of the information on our website for parents who might have missed it. So I just wondered if you could just recap on some of the key bits of information for parents so that they could access it on the website and find out information if they couldn't come.
No problem
today.
at all.
Thank you.
So one of the things we talked about today with families was around our housing pathway, and this is obviously for adults, people moving from younger persons into adulthood and looking at housing options for the future. So we've got the Somerset Housing Pathway document, which will be available, I guess, on your links to families and on the website.
We'll do that,
And we'll just very briefly talk through what's in that kind of document. So there's lots of information in here around kind of the assessment process and the Care Act as well, which is really, really important. But it really focuses on those housing options. So one of the things we always want to look at is actually someone staying where they are. So actually, does someone need some adaptations? Is there some equipment that can support people to live where they are? Is there some technology that can support people?
So you would try to promote independence, with the right amount of support, but independence where it's appropriate.
Absolutely. So if someone wants to continue living where they live, that's absolutely fine. But we can do things to help support that process. So for example, there's things like there's various grants, but it's all very much dependent on what the individual needs. It's by an individual basis. And obviously as technology is moving on, there's lots of other bits and pieces that can support people to live as independently as they can, but also help them develop new skills.
You did mention some particular type of technology. Was it called Possum?
There's some. I mean, technology is developing kind of, week on week, day on day. Possum technology is very much around things like voice automating your curtains opening, for example. So if you're very physically disabled and you need support to open your curtains or perhaps get out of bed, rather than you have to call for help, actually you can just say to an Alexa or one of those kind of devices, open my curtains, and then the curtains opens automatically. So not only are you more independent, but you've also got a bit more dignity. You're not waiting on a member of staff to come and support you. You've got a bit more choice on how choice and control on how you live. So there's some links in the guidance around how to use the different types of technology available. Ellie, you're going to talk a little bit about choice-based lettings?
So we also have choice-based lettings, which is done through our or coordinated through our district councils. So that's around houses, social houses. You can access choice-based lettings through Home Finders. I believe it's called.
Is that like a website? Home Finders
website? I think it's called Home Finders Somerset. I think it's called. It's called homefinderssomerset.co.uk. You go on. It's a fairly simple online form. You can register from 16 onwards. I think if you're under 18, you require a guarantor. And then you can bid on properties that the district councils hold, so social houses. You will also be assessed by the district around banding, so you can be either gold, silver and bronze. There is also an emergency band, but that's completely separate. And
that banding is to denotes how quickly you get to
the top of the list. It's your priority.
Absolutely. They also do look at priority around length of registration. So if two people are on the same level of banding but bid for the same property, they might look at someone who's been registered for 6 months, or someone who's been registered for 18 months. So the person that's been registered the longest would most likely get priority on that property. So we always say to people to register on Home Finders as early as possible, because the longer you've been registered, the better, really.
So a parent could register on behalf of their young person with difficulties.
And there are the district councils do have their own sort of Home Finders teams, choice-based letting teams. So if you require any sort of support or have any questions, you can contact their teams. The details are within the document that Jules has put together.
What if you wanted to register your young person at the age of 16 because you're thinking, I don't know how long it might take to actually find the right property? What if a property came up and you thought, actually, they're still a little bit younger, have registered, but we're not ready for that move yet? Can you reject any, or how does that work?
I mean, my first bit of advice would be, if you're not quite ready, don't don't actively bid.
Right.
Because if you're bidding for properties and then you get offered and then you reject the property, that's when that stands, if that makes sense.
Right. So you could register. That's different from bidding.
Absolutely. So if you actively bid on a property, you're selecting that property and you're kind of clicking a button that yes, I want to register my interest for that property, for example. If you've rejected properties up to 3 times, after the third rejection of a property, the choice-based letting team, I think they get in contact really and just kind of say, you've been offered properties you're rejecting, can we ask why, should we have a conversation about it? So
if a young person had just been registered on it from the age of 16,
but not bidding, that's fine.
That's fine, and it would still count towards their sort of waiting time, if you like.
Yeah. So when someone feels ready then to move on, they can then actively start bidding.
Yes. Yeah. And if I had a young person who wanted to take this option, or as a parent, I was supporting to make that decision. If they went into social housing, would they still be able to have any other sort of support package if they needed that? Does it mean there'd have to be somebody who can completely live independently without any support at all?
No, absolutely not. People can live within their own property and have their own care and support.
Yes,
absolutely. And that care and support can vary massively from someone who just needs support just with their evening meal, for example, hour a day, or someone that has pretty much 24/7 support. So it can really vary. So no, we wouldn't say that just because someone wanted to live in a property through choice-based lettings and have their own property, that doesn't mean they wouldn't have care and support needs. So no.
Thank you. So what are the other kinds of choices that are available?
So we've also got supported living.
Yeah.
That can look really, really different from sort of scheme to scheme. Supported living is a 24-hour supervision service.
Yes.
Really. Individuals that have daytime requirements and have support needs overnight. That could be a sleep-in member of staff or a waking night.
Yes.
Within a supported living, similar to choice-based lettings, they would have a tenancy. So they would have, security effectively.
Can you tell me about that security? I'm just interested in that. What level of security is it? What does it mean?
So if you live in supported housing, like any kind of housing, you have a tenancy, which is obviously very different to residential care, where you don't have what we call security of tenure. For example, if you're in residential care, you have no kind of legal duty to be able to reside in that property.
Yes.
So in a sense, if it's not working well, or the provider can't support you, because the provider controls the property as well, you would have to move out of that property. Whereas if you're in a supported housing scheme or social housing, you have a tenancy. So tenancy is a signed agreement between yourselves and the landlord. And often those tenancies with social landlords or housing associations are often, God, I can't. They're called assured short hold tenancies. So they're very secure tenancies.
So you couldn't just be thrown out.
No,
you would have the same housing rights as any other individual.
Oh, right.
As you or I would.
Sounds much
renting a property.
Much more secure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
With supported living, the housing element of it, so the tenancy and the care and support are two very separate things.
All right.
So if you moved into a supported living scheme and you had a provider, after 6 months, a year, whenever, if that wasn't working anymore with that provider for whatever reason, you then have the right, as it's your home, to have another provider support you.
Yes.
So just because you don't have that provider anymore doesn't mean necessarily you'd have to move out of that property. So that's what supported living provides security from a housing perspective, if you will. So, that's your home.
Oh, right.
And you're supported to live very independently.
Yes.
So supported with your kind of assessed needs.
Right.
So if you're assessed needing help with like washing or cooking, or getting into bed and stuff, that support package is built around your needs.
Yeah. Oh, right. So it's really individualised.
And if somebody wanted to access supported living, how would they access that?
So to access supported living, first step is always a Care Act assessment.
Yes.
Via a worker.
Yes.
The worker would then support with the
supported living process. Social worker.
That's done through adult social care.
Through adult social care, and obviously the social worker then assess the individual and look at the support they needed and help to find a kind of suitable property with support.
And are there some properties where you potentially could be with other young adults with similar needs? Are there some that are sort of, I don't know, developed in a bespoke way, or
so all of our supported living schemes look different in one way or another. We have some that are sort of shared houses, and a lot of the space is communal, big communal kitchen, communal living area, and we also have supported living schemes that look very different to that, and they're individual flats, so a fully functioning flat with communal areas there as an option.
So you could potentially have your own front door, your own flat, but then have an area where you could socialise if you wanted to,
and then you can step back if you wanted to, and you have your own space. So supported living can range on a scale massively.
And also within supported living, that includes things like sheltered housing and extra care schemes.
I thought sheltered housing was just for older people.
A lot of people think that, but actually, in a lot of cases, it's open to anyone with kind of that kind of relevant support needs. Quite often, we've got a lot of people living very successfully in sheltered housing.
So it's not an age.
No. Some are. But it's on an individual by individual basis.
Yes.
Oh, right.
And one of the other things we wanted to talk about is there's other housing options. So private rental can still be an option for some people. It's just important that people remember that social housing is regulated. So housing associations have to provide homes, what they call decent home standards. And private landlords are not regulated in quite the same way. Right. So it's just important that people need to make sure that they know the difference between the two.
So there's not perhaps so much sort of quality assurance or
potentially
necessarily.
The other option we've got is a home ownership scheme for people with long-term disabilities. This is mainly for people who haven't been able to source anywhere to live through any of the other options. There's lots of information available on the internet, and it's in our guidance as well, and that is kind of a shared ownership scheme with a housing association. It's not overly straightforward, but for the right people, it's a really great option.
And we have had some amazing success stories with that, absolutely.
So I imagine that the idea of owning your own home, which is a lot of us without disabilities aspire to, as well as people with disabilities. So what would you have to do? How does that work?
There's a very clear criteria about the kind of level, because it is reliant on kind of benefits to pay for. So it's for people who are probably unlikely to be able to ever to work. And so it's a certain level of welfare that you need to be on and able to qualify for that scheme. And also you have to make sure that you have tried every other route, and that's basically the only last option available to you. But it's worked nationally. It's a nationally recognised scheme. There's about 1,500 people in the country who've bought their own homes through this scheme. It's run by an organisation called My Safe Home. So if you Google My Safe Home, you'll see all their stories and bits and pieces. It's a really, really great scheme.
Oh, fantastic, brilliant. So that's they own their home in conjunction with a.
It's a shared ownership scheme with a housing association. So and also within our guidance, there's bits and pieces on kind of family trust funds. So if people want to kind of have got some spare capital and they want to kind of potentially buy something for their son or daughter, there's some trust funds that will support you to do that as well. Because actually, for some people, that's what they want to do, and that's absolutely fine. The other bit of so the guidance is available to kind of any kind of Somerset families. And then the other document that's really, really good is by an organisation called the Challenging Behaviour Foundation. And it's called Planning Your Home Information Pack. And I'd suggest kind of any family reads this, because it's that real step-by-step guide from when someone is moving out from home. This tells them everything they need to know.
So they could buy that via the Challenging Behaviour website.
I think it's about £10 to buy now. For families coming and talking to us, then we've got the older version, which we'll happily hand out for free. But the newer version is available on the Challenging Behaviour Foundation website.
That's lovely, thank you. Well, thanks very much for that information, and I'm sure if we think of any more questions from the parents who've been today, I'm sure we'll be sending them your way.
Please do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alison.